For 19 days, Ethan Cross listened to the walls of Bellmont Hall. He pressed his palm flat against the plaster in section D7, closed his eyes, and waited for the building to tell him what everyone else refused to hear. On the morning Victoria Hayes fired him for wasting company time, he left one handwritten note on the maintenance desk. 3 days later, the ceiling in the Grand Hall dropped 14 inches during a sold-out performance. 2,400 people evacuated in 11 minutes. Nobody died. Nobody knew that the man they dismissed as obsessive was the only reason the word nobody could be used twice in that sentence. Ethan was 34 years old and worked as a facilities maintenance technician at Bellmont Concert Hall, a 112-year-old building on the east side of the city that had survived 2 fires, 1 flood, and 3 ownership changes. He woke at 5:47 every morning, made coffee in a chipped mug that had belonged to his wife, and walked down the narrow hallway to his daughter's room. Maya was 6, missing her 2 front teeth, and slept with a stuffed owl she called Echo because she had read in a library book that owls could hear things other animals couldn't. Ethan would sit on the edge of her bed and brush the tangles from her hair while she surfaced slowly from sleep, one hand already reaching for the owl. "Hall day?" she asked one Thursday morning, eyes still half closed. "Every day is Hall day," he said. His wife Sarah had died 3 years earlier in a car accident on the interstate. The medical bills had emptied their savings. Ethan had been working as a senior acoustic engineer at Hamilton Design Group when it happened. He had taken emergency leave, then extended leave, and when he finally tried to return, the firm had restructured. His position had been eliminated. The patents he'd helped develop were reassigned to a team that had never consulted him. He opened the maintenance job at Bellmont because it paid enough to keep Maya fed and because the building was close to her school. Nobody at the hall knew he had designed acoustic systems for concert venues across 3 states. He had decided not to mention it. Bellmont Hall was dying. Ethan had known it from his 2nd week on the job. The building had a sound, not the sound of music or footsteps or the HVAC system cycling on at 6 a.m. It had a deeper sound, the kind that lived in the structure itself, a low harmonic frequency that appeared at specific intervals when temperature and humidity aligned in particular ways. He had first heard it while replacing a light fixture in the upper gallery, a sustained tone, barely audible, just below 40 Hz. He had stopped mid-task and listened for 3 full minutes before locating the source. The tone was coming from the load-bearing beam network in the ceiling assembly. The building was resonating. Over the following weeks, he mapped it. He spent his lunch breaks and end-of-shift hours moving through the hall with a handheld frequency analyzer he had kept from his previous life. He pressed his ear to walls, placed his palm on support columns, and recorded the patterns. The resonance appeared most clearly in section D-7, a 40-foot span of the eastern ceiling where the original 1911 construction met a 1970s expansion joint. The joint had been reinforced twice, once in 1984 and again in 1998, but the reinforcement had been cosmetic. The underlying beam structure was flexing under load, and every flex produced a harmonic signature that transferred stress into the surrounding masonry. Ethan could hear the micro-fractures forming. The building was cracking from the inside. He reported it to his supervisor, a man named Dennis, who had worked at the hall for 22 years and who viewed structural concerns as someone else's department. Dennis forwarded the report to the facilities director. The facilities director forwarded it to executive management. Executive management did nothing. Victoria Hayes had been appointed CEO of the Bellmont Hall Foundation 6 months earlier. She was 31, legitimately accomplished, with a background in nonprofit arts administration and a reputation for turning struggling cultural institutions into financially stable operations. She had come to Bellmont with a clear mandate: raise revenue, expand programming, and prove that historic venues could compete with modern facilities. She was under enormous pressure. The Foundation's board expected measurable results within the first year. She worked 70-hour weeks. She made decisions quickly and did not tolerate inefficiency. On a Tuesday morning in October, Victoria was conducting a walkthrough of the building's operational areas. She wanted to see where maintenance hours were being allocated. She walked into section D7 and found Ethan standing with his back to the corridor, both hands pressed flat against the wall, eyes closed. He had been there for 6 minutes. She watched him for approximately 12 seconds before speaking. "What are you doing?" Ethan opened his eyes and turned. He recognized her from the staff meeting 3 weeks earlier. "Listening," he said. "To what?" "The wall." Victoria looked at him for a moment. Then she looked at the wall. Then she looked back at him. "This is what you've been doing during your shifts?" "Some of them." She pulled out her phone and opened the scheduling app. Maintenance logs showed Ethan had logged over 40 hours in Section D-7 over the past 3 weeks. Hours that should have been allocated to routine repairs, event setup, and systems checks. "You're being paid to maintain this facility," she said, "not to stand in hallways listening to walls." "The wall is telling me something," Ethan said. "If you give me 10 minutes, I can show you." "I don't need 10 minutes, Victoria said. "I need you to do your job." Raymond Cole, the hall's master carpenter, and a man who had worked alongside Ethan for 8 months, was standing at the far end of the corridor. He had heard the exchange. He knew what Ethan had been doing. He knew because Ethan had shown him the frequency data, the resonance charts, the acoustic map of the failing joint. Raymond also knew that interrupting Victoria Hayes mid-decision was not something people did without consequence. He said nothing. That afternoon, Ethan was called to the administrative office. Victoria was seated behind the desk with HR present. The termination was efficient. She cited time mismanagement, failure to complete assigned tasks, and behavior inconsistent with the responsibilities of the position. Security collected his badge. He was escorted from the building by 4:15. Before he left, he wrote a note on a piece of maintenance department letterhead and left it on Raymond's desk. The note read, "Section D-7, Eastern Ceiling. Expansion joint is failing. Resonance frequency 38 to 42 Hz under load. Do not schedule events with full seating until this is inspected by a structural engineer. The harmonic transfer is accelerating. This is not a maintenance issue. This is a failure in progress." He signed it, folded it once, and placed it where Raymond would find it. Raymond found it 20 minutes after Ethan left. He read it twice. Then he walked to Victoria's office and requested 5 minutes to discuss a facilities matter. He was told she was in back-to-back meetings for the remainder of the day and to submit the concern via the internal ticketing system. He submitted the ticket. It was marked low priority and assigned to the facilities director, who was on vacation. 3 days later, Bellmont Hall hosted the Greaves Symphony Orchestra for a sold-out performance of Mahler's Symphony No. 2. All 2,400 seats were filled. The performance began at 7:30 p.m. The building's resonance frequency aligned with the orchestra's output during the third movement. At 8:47 p.m., the ceiling in Section D7 dropped 14 inches. Support beams separated from their mounting brackets. Plaster rained into the upper gallery. The conductor stopped mid-phrase. The audience stood in near silence. The evacuation was orderly. Security protocols, ironically designed by Ethan during his first month, functioned exactly as written. By 9:02 p.m., the building was empty. By 9:15 p.m., the fire marshal had closed the venue pending structural review. By 9:30 p.m., Victoria Hayes was standing in the upper gallery looking at the damage, and someone from the maintenance crew, a young man named Aaron, handed her a folded piece of paper. "Raymond said you need to see this." Victoria unfolded the note. She read it once. She read it again. She looked at the date, 3 days earlier. She asked where Ethan Cross lived. The apartment was on the 11th floor of a building 8 blocks north. Victoria arrived at 10:20 p.m. and knocked. The door opened. A small girl stood in the doorway holding a stuffed owl by one wing. "Are you here about the hall?" Maya asked. Victoria did not answer immediately. She had not expected a child. Maya opened the door wider. Inside, Ethan was asleep on the sofa, still wearing the shirt from his last day of work. A laptop was open beside him, displaying a structural analysis diagram. His jacket was still on. One shoe had been removed. The other was still on his foot. "Daddy hasn't really slept since he got fired," Maya said, lowering her voice the way children do when sleep nearby is needed. "He said something bad was going to happen at the hall. He kept saying he tried to tell someone." Victoria looked at the apartment, the careful economy of it, the evidence of a life organized around necessity and love. She thought about the image she had constructed in 12 seconds 3 days earlier, the certainty she had felt, the complete and total wrongness of it. She asked Maya if she could wake him. It took several attempts. When Ethan finally surfaced, he sat up slowly and registered Victoria standing in his living room with the particular exhaustion of a person who has just been handed one more impossible thing. "The ceiling dropped," Victoria said, "exactly where you said it would." Ethan looked at her for a moment, then he reached for the laptop and pulled up the file he had been working on since the day he was fired. Frequency charts, load calculations, resonance maps, a full structural analysis of section D-7 and the 6 adjacent zones that were experiencing similar harmonic transfer. "How many people were inside?" he asked. "All of them. 2,400. He closed his eyes briefly. Not shock. Just the particular heaviness of being right about something you had hoped not to be right about. "Section D-7 is the visible failure," he said. "It's not the only failure. The 1970s expansion created 3 separate resonance zones. If you don't address all of them, the building will continue to fail in pieces." Victoria sat down in the chair across from him. She did not arrange her words carefully. "I didn't listen to you 3 days ago. I fired you before I understood what you were trying to tell me. I need to apologize for that." Ethan said nothing. "The building is closed," she continued. "We have structural engineers arriving tomorrow morning. Nobody in that room understands what you understand about this building. I'm asking you to come back." "I'm not coming back for the apology," Ethan said. "I'm coming back because 2,400 people walked out of that hall tonight, and if someone doesn't fix what's actually broken, the next group won't." He stood, changed his shirt, and told Maya that Miss Harmon from down the hall would be coming over. Maya looked at Victoria with the calm, assessing gaze of a 6-year-old and said, "Are you going to listen this time?" Victoria looked at her. "Yes." When Ethan walked back into Bellmont Hall at 11:40 p.m., the room shifted in a way that was immediately felt by everyone present. Raymond met him at the door. Ethan moved directly to section D-7 and began a rapid assessment. He put 5 people on documenting crack patterns. He sent 2 engineers to map the resonance zones. He asked 3 others to pull the original 1911 construction drawings and the 1970s expansion permits. Over the following 6 hours, the failure was isolated, mapped, and understood. The fix would take weeks. The cost would be significant. But the catastrophic outcome, a full structural collapse during a seated performance, had been prevented. At 6 a.m., Victoria called an emergency board meeting. She presented the incident report in full. She explained that Ethan had detected the failure 19 days before anyone else, that he had reported it through proper channels, that he had been dismissed before he could brief her directly, that his warning, left on a desk 3 days earlier, had been ignored. "This morning I fired Ethan Cross before I had heard a complete explanation from him," she said. "I made that decision based on an image that confirmed what I had already decided to believe. I was wrong." The board moved quickly. Ethan was offered a position as Director of Facilities and Structural Integrity, with authority to halt any event if safety conditions were not met. He negotiated one condition first, a revised reporting protocol that gave frontline maintenance staff a direct path to executive leadership when raising safety concerns. When the board accepted it, Victoria looked at him and said, "You spent your leverage on a policy that protects the next person." "The next person shouldn't have to go through what I went through," Ethan said. 3 weeks later, Maya asked if the hall was safe now. "Safer," Ethan said. "We're working on it." She held Echo a little tighter. "Did they say sorry?" "They did." "Good," Maya said. "Echo says buildings talk if you know how to listen." Ethan smiled. It was small and quiet and real. He kept the 5:47 wake-up. He kept the coffee mug. He kept the evening routine with Maya and the careful economy of their days. He did not become a different person. He became a more settled version of the person he had already been. Someone who knew with certainty now that the things worth attending to rarely announce themselves, and that the difference between catastrophe and safety is often nothing more than the willingness to stop and listen properly when everyone else has walked past.